right now with this administration is what the president says himself. It's what Trump says, and he's not a very specific guy. He doesn't know a lot about the military and how that might play in a situation like this. So when he talks, it's vague, and no one in his surrounding is trying to sharpen what he really means. By saying, "Well, this is what the president really means." No
Yes.
one is saying that.
There is a certain ambivalence about how President Trump sees his role in solving this war. He has always kept this kind of equidistance between Ukraine and Russia, which obviously is wrong morally and strategically.
Well, there's still no sign of peace in Ukraine, no sign that Vladimir Putin wants peace, just the opposite, as Russian drones and missiles rain down by the hundred. But today in Paris and online, Ukraine's friends, leaders from across Europe and beyond, met to discuss what some hoped would be an emerging plan to guard the peace on Ukraine's side as and when the fighting stops. Hope even that we'd finally hear clear guarantees from President Trump's US administration that America would support the so-called coalition of the willing when the time comes. So after all the wrangling about which country was prepared to contribute and what, are we closer to a plan? Has there been any kind of breakthrough? Doesn't quite seem that way. After the meeting, President Macron, he was saying that US security guarantees would be finalised in the next few days. Was that a hope or an expectation? And Russia, of course, continues to reject peace talks. Would there be new sanctions? I spoke earlier to the geopolitics expert Tim Marshall. He had this to say.
It's a bit of a diplomatic dance, isn't it? I think it's possible we are slightly incrementally advancing towards a genuine coalition of the willing, but it's a bit of a circular debate in that the coalition of the willing will be willing if the Americans are. And we don't know yet how the Americans are willing, and therefore we don't know who within the coalition of the willing is willing.
So Tim Marshall with his view. Now let's get the thoughts of Jim Townsend, who's here with us now, the former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence and for European and NATO policy in the United States. Welcome back to the show, Jim.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
And you're very welcome. And also welcome back, Fabrice Pothier, the former Director of NATO Policy Planning. Hello to you, Fabrice.
Hi, nice to be here and nice to see Jim.
Well, good to have you two friends back together for this reunion. Let's see what we can all learn between us all and for our listeners. Jim, the point that Tim was making there, are we looking here at something of a circular dance, Jim, where President Trump is looking to the coalition of the willing, mostly Europeans, to come up with clear plans to defend the peace in Ukraine with their own resources, and they are waiting for more guarantees from America to guarantee their security when the peace comes along? It's a bit of a standoff, Jim. Is that fair?
Well, it is a circular dance. It's a slow dance, and it's also moving in a certain direction. So the geometry is a little difficult here, but the administration has come a long way. They were not looking towards supporting at all a coalition a month or two ago. They've come along now. They've not really defined very well what this means. I think there's some misunderstanding. Frankly, some people are thinking it's combat aircraft because Trump had talked about air support, but I don't think that's what he's talking about. It's more logistics and enablers, as we say, intelligence, this type of thing. So I think there's some misunderstanding there, and I think probably Washington's going to hear from Witkoff after the meeting, and maybe what Witkoff has to say will move along a little more detail from the White House and a little bit more of an assured position about, in fact, participating in that coalition.
Well, I mean, from what we heard, Jim, Steve Witkoff, the president's envoy, was only in the meeting for about 20 minutes, if that's correct. I don't follow. Please explain to me how it's possible for there to be confusion and misunderstanding, because these political leaders have spoken a number of times, and the commanders of their respective militaries have sat around the table a number of times. How could there be doubt about what President Trump intends to offer by way of planes on the ground, as it were, or other commitments through surveillance and intelligence? Surely it's easy enough to clear that up if the president wants to be clear.
And I think that's exactly the point. In the old days, you would have a better idea of where the administration stood by talking to the Secretary of State or talking to an ambassador or a military authority. But right now, with this administration, it's what the president says himself. It's what Trump says, and he's not a very specific guy. He doesn't know a lot about the military and how that might play in a situation like this. So when he talks, it's vague, and no one in his surrounding is trying to sharpen what he really means. By saying, "Well, this is what the president really means."
Yes.
No one is saying that. And that's the problem. And I'm not sure Witkoff is a very good Trump whisperer in this respect as well.
Right, Fabrice Pothier, formerly of NATO, this is not encouraging to hear, is it? The president is being frustratingly vague, no matter which way you look at it. It does sort of suggest that he just does not want to engage in any detail. He does not want to commit in any kind of significant way. Is that fair? Is that your thinking?
Yeah, I think we're a bit in a kind of catch-22 situation where the US administration is expecting to see and the Europeans to show some real muscles and real willingness to put skin in the game.
Yeah.
But at the same time, for the Europeans to do so, they need to have some form of US guarantees that they will support a European force deployment. So that's where we are in this funny dance. But I do agree that President Trump, first, is not very specific. Second, doesn't like to be boxed in a decision, especially when it comes to force deployment. He's always been a quite reluctant, in a way, decision maker when it comes to US forces being deployed and used abroad. So I think we're in this kind of moment. But on the other hand, clearly, like Jim was saying earlier, I think the needle is moving in the right direction.
Yes.
The question, however, and there's a third player here, is Vladimir Putin.
Yes.
And Putin is going to act not just in the military field, but in the informational, diplomatic fields, to try to undermine everything he can not to see a European force deployment in Ukraine.
Right.
So we should not underestimate Putin's pressure and game to undermine the momentum, not just in Europe, but especially in the United States.
Okay, now that is an important point, Fabrice. Look, surely it needs to be said then, at this point, maybe it should have been said already, it is not up to Putin to exercise a veto. He's the enemy in Ukraine. He's the threat to freedom in Europe. His view should be set aside, Fabrice.
Yes, but first, I think Jim hinted at that. There is a certain ambivalence about how President Trump sees his role in solving this war. He has always kept this kind of equidistance between Ukraine and Russia, which obviously is wrong morally and strategically. He's also very keen on engaging with strong men like Vladimir Putin. So he's unwilling to go all the way to exert that pressure or to show strength towards Putin. So I think that gets us in this kind of funny position where we are not clear that we are willing to exert and deploy force, and we're willing to actually lean on Vladimir Putin. And I think this is what Putin is exploiting. And just one thing, this is where the Europeans are also a bit stuck. Some are arguing for deployment before a ceasefire as a way to obtain a ceasefire and to bring Putin to the negotiation table. But some, I think still in Germany and other parts, are still arguing that this should come after a ceasefire. And this gives Putin, obviously, the perfect card to play with.
Right, let me come to you then, Jim, on this ultimate question, if you like. It's if you like, I'm echoing a point that I think is in the mind and sometimes on the lips of President Trump. And for the sake of this conversation, I suggest he's got a good point here, which is that if the leaders of Europe, including Starmer, including Macron, are arguing that Ukraine's defence is our defence too, Ukraine's freedom is our freedom too, well, then we should be ready to put up. We should be ready to deploy to Ukraine when the time comes and defend Ukraine for the sake of defending ourselves. And if that means warning Putin that he goes to war with Ukraine, once the war ends, he'll be going to war with us too. That's surely part of America's point, and maybe they got a point, Jim.
Well, it's a very interesting approach, and by the way, what Fabrice has said, I stand by as well. He's exactly right. It's strong language, this idea that of telling Putin that if you invade Ukraine yet a third time, we're going to fight you.
Yes.
For all the right reasons. But in saying that the assumption behind that is that politically the nations are ready. They're ready militarily as well. And that the U.S. is firmly with them and will backstop them, not with words, but with combat forces.
Yes.
I mean, going in that direction requires a lot. I'm making the point that it's true. This is absolutely European security. This is absolutely key to deter Putin. But there has got to be the political backup to that, and more importantly, the military capability
Yeah,
has got to be there too. That's going to cause for money and time and a lot of convincing
yeah.
in Europe to back this up. And that's the problem. There's not the time, and I don't think
Yeah,
there's the political will there either.
but again, that is the problem, Fabrice. I want to get your view on this. If we're going to wait in the West, I put this for the sake of this argument. If we're in Western Europe and our friends of Ukraine, if we're waiting to be so strong that Vladimir Putin would not even dream of crossing the line into Ukraine, we're going to be waiting a very, very long time. We're not going to get there, arguably, for years. And maybe there's an argument for standing together and just saying to Putin, if you take us on, you take us on, but the cost to you, whatever state we're in, would be catastrophic. And using that as the deterrent, is that not a fair position? If you disagree, tell me why.
I think there's a paradox here, is that Vladimir Putin doesn't take us, at least Europeans, really seriously, because we have not until now shown enough strength, enough steel to really make a difference in his calculus. However, we also have to be clear that he's been trying to break and undermine Ukraine for the past 10 years. And from a strategic point of view, he's failed. And he's failed against just one army, the Ukrainian army. And of course, they have received Western equipment, but it's to say that from a military point of view, he's not been that successful.
Yes.
Even his summer offensive, which was, pushed in the Russian propaganda channels, has been actually a pretty weak one, a damn squid. So I think if you start to see a bit of European steel, either in the air or in the sea or both, I think that changes quite fundamentally the Putin military calculus, and the cost starts to be quite high. So we should not underestimate that bringing European forces in the mix could make actually a difference. And let's not make any mistake here.
Yes.
The fighting will still be done by the Ukrainians.
Yes.
And actually, I don't think the Ukrainians want to have European soldiers in the middle of that. I think they know how to do it, but they need a backup. They need the main cities, the main population centers, also the ISR, the intelligence surveillance reconnaissance, done by the West, including the US and the Europeans. And that's what we're talking about. So it's not a direct confrontation, but it's a strengthening of the Ukrainian rear in order for them to hold the line in the contact line and then sit at the negotiation table.
Okay, Fabrice, when you use the expression time to show some steel, maybe that's a very good way of putting it. I just want to ask you before I go back to Jim, if we're looking for an American security guarantee of whatever size, and we're seeing from the Trump administration, all hints say they want to do the minimum, what is the minimum necessary to give the coalition of the willing the kind of backup that it needs to do the job that it wants to do? Fabrice.
Well, for sure, Jim will have a better answer, but I think essentially it is where the Europeans are the weakest, which is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. It's also logistic, possibly a major deployment or mobility of forces and air defense systems. I think if the US is willing to fill those gaps, the rest, including air power, actually, Jim, I hope you will agree with that, this is not the weakest gap in the European inventory. We do have F-16, Rafale, Tornadoes, which we can deploy in number, and we have shown some capacity in other theaters and operations. But what we need are the backbones, and the backbones is what the US can deliver.
Okay, so Jim, that's the challenge, as it were, from your old NATO mate. What do you say to him?
Well, I think, as usual, he's absolutely right. I'm with him on that. Certainly in the air, Europe has a bit of overmatch on the Russians, quite frankly. There's a lot today that Europe could bring to the fight if they wanted to fight. They were willing to fight. The politics were there. The forces were going to be mobilized. And they said, and the signal being sent to Putin is, don't try this. You're going to run into us. The question becomes the Americans. I think an appropriate American backstop, to use that word, would be a lot of the enablers that Fabrice just talked about, maybe an armored brigade combat team there to show that we've also are going to be on the ground. But it's that political will that I think for this administration isn't there to do that. Unless unless Trump gets very pissed off and Trump says, by God, I'm giving up. I'm throwing my lot in with the Europeans. We're going to go right on in there with Ukraine. And we're going to do what we can to strengthen the Ukrainian military as well. So you got the Ukrainian military doing the fighting, just what Fabrice said, backed up by European combat forces that are going to do the job of and then they in turn are backed up by us. That would be the dream. That's the dream team.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid in this case, that's not where the Americans are. I don't see that being what Trump would do unless the situation really changes. And I think, too, it would be hard to get a lot of buy-in in that coalition to go with that approach as well. I think there's some countries that would do it for sure, but I'm not sure you get all of the 30 members of the coalition in there in that way.
Okay, that kind of American backup. I think dream is the operative term. Some might say even fantasy. Let us see. Jim Townsend, Fabrice Pothier, great to talk to you. Thank you.